What's up, everybody? It's Mike. We're back here on the Pitch Please podcast. Today, I'm here with Peter-Paul from FrontFundr. They're an equity crowdfunding platform giving everyday people like you and I access to help support startups and other growing businesses by providing them with funding in exchange for equity. I think we're going to talk a lot more about it. But first, let's hand it over to Peter-Paul to introduce himself and maybe start with a little bit of background on yourself and what your role is at FrontFundr.
Sure. Thanks, Mike. And it's a great to be with you today and talk about the exciting and evolving landscape of investment crowdfunding. So yeah, my name is Peter-Paul Van Hoeken. I'm the founder and CEO of FrontFundr. And FrontFundr is Canada's leading investment crowdfunding platform. And as Mike, as you mentioned, basically what it comes down to is that we enable companies, private companies, to raise capital from the wider investor community, emphasis on wider, so far beyond the traditional investors of angels, VCs, but really open it up for everyone. So that's what FrontFundr is doing, and we've been at it now for about 6, 7 years, and it's an exciting and evolving industry.
Well, I'm excited to learn more about FrontFundr, about the industry, where and how maybe I can get involved. But let's learn a little bit about your background. You've got, obviously, I was just checking out your LinkedIn profile, a massively long list of tremendously rich experiences. Maybe talk to us about where, your career journey or, life journey started and some of the things leading up to where you are today with FrontFundr.
Great, yeah, yeah, and that's been an interesting journey indeed. And I started my career actually in banking, in the banking industry. This was back in Europe, mainly in the Netherlands, where I'm originally from, and as well as being based in London, UK for a while. And so yeah, work for a large international bank and always been sort of interested, intrigued in banking and finance, and so that kept me busy, in that industry for about 8, 9 years. And the more time I spend in the industry, the more I also start thinking, wow, is this where is this taking me, and is this where I'm going to stay? Is this where I'm going to retire? And I also kind of thought, it's a bit of an interesting industry and a tricky industry perhaps, and also learned how it's not necessarily as open, as accessible, and easy to understand for the wider investor community. So for the wider public actually, and so that together with exploring a move from the Netherlands to Canada, which happens in 2010 when I immigrated to Vancouver with my family, was also a great opportunity to start a new, I would say, new book actually, and sort of leave the big banking industry behind me, but still intrigued by finance and investing, and thinking, uh, what what can we change in this industry? And so when I landed in Vancouver, I really started all over again, if you like, and started working with small companies and helping them to get ready to raise capital. And that was a time where I sort of discovered how challenging it is for companies to raise capital, but also how it's a very traditional industry, where these startups go to a very select and relatively small group of investors like angels, VCs, and really a small group, and also how in this whole process of capital raising, technology is not really used at all. It's very archaic. It's very investor pitches, events, and investor meetings. And why are we not using technology like in any other industry that basically took advantage of that and went online? So that together with what was already happening in countries like the UK, where investment crowdfunding actually started around 2010, and where it was well on its way. I thought, hey, that's interesting. That is really intriguing to me. Why? Because it's about really opening it up and making investing available to the public, but then for the private markets, which traditionally the public had been locked out from. So that really piqued my interest, and at that time, this was around 2014. So I spent a couple of years in Canada, got a sort of an understanding of the lay of the land, how it works here, how to also work with securities regulation, which is pretty complex in Canada. I thought, hey, this actually can be done. This is exciting. This is about something new and truly creating a market and opening it up to the public. So that's where the FrontFundr journey started. And where, of course, then you have to start putting the piece of the puzzle together. But and start engaging with regulators and start sort of discussing the idea of creating a platform and opening it up, which at that time, so around 2015, really was non-existent in North America. I would say it was really in the early stages. So that's sort of a bit of a journey where I thought, this is exciting, this makes sense to me, this is a purpose where we enable startups to tap a pool of capital that traditionally they was not accessible to them, and on the other side of the marketplace to basically invite the public to invest in companies from the very beginning, as opposed to typically angels, VCs, and other typically already wealthy investors that have access to invest in the early days, and where we all know that companies do well, where there are significant returns. And then finally, when a company goes public, then the public can participate, and we all know that the huge returns have already been realized before that. So yeah, that is basically where I thought, yeah, I'm gonna get my teeth into this, and this excites me.
That's interesting. So your background was primarily banking. And so you understood the backgrounds of banking, but not even in Canada, which is interesting. And I want to get to that aspect of you becoming an entrepreneur in a new country. But you started this journey in banking. In banking, did you ever work with startups previously in any of your roles in Europe? Because it sounds like when you came here, you started working with companies to help them raise funding. But was that part of your roles at those banks also in Europe? And that's sort of where the first bridge or conduit to this potential idea came to life?
No, no,
Okay.
I was actually in banking. No, I was doing, totally different things within the banking, the bank I work for. And actually, and I was still working for the bank around the whole, 2008 financial crisis, which was quite interesting actually to see from the inside of the bank, also to see how, to be honest, dysfunctional the industry is, in my opinion. To find the banking industry and really some serious problems. But I know I was actually dealing more with larger corporate clients. I was also involved with with larger project financing, with securitization, interesting enough. Mortgage securitization, one of the things that ultimately you know uh, brought the whole thing down in 2008, but this was more of a subprime in the US. But so I was not I did all sort of different things, except really working with small startups. So it's not necessarily that there was sort of an exposure there and I thought, okay, that's more what I want to do. It was clearly for me, like, yeah, it's time to move away from, or move on from really the large corporate banking world to sort of um, hands-on finance and investing with startups that simply need money to grow, to develop an idea and to grow their business. So it was really in that respect a new chapter, which obviously I got exposed to when I started working with companies in Vancouver, and also the whole going into, or financing, investing from an entrepreneurial perspective myself was also something I got excited about. But that was definitely a new journey.
Interesting. So it was kind of just this next chapter, if you would. But now, had you ever thought you would be an entrepreneur, or are there other people around you that have started startups that were influential in you even considering this? Like, it sounded like you were looking for that next chapter that was going to take you outside of the traditional banking world. But for most people, that isn't to become a founder or to start a startup. And so, is there someone or something that might have influenced that, or was it just frustration in this problem that you started to see once you were in Vancouver working with people to help raise capital?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I it's interesting, you graduate and then you kind of, I did my internships. As I said, I was at that time, intrigued by banking and finance industry in general, and so you sort of, I thought, well, that's something I want to sort of get into, and so I start engaging with banks and looking at opportunities in that industry. Um, Actually, before that, even before I graduated, I did also this was a university where besides study, you can obviously do all sorts of different things. And one of the things I did there was founded with a few fellow students a sort of a consultancy organization. This was in the University of Rotterdam in the Netherlands. That was basically helping companies with particular projects. And what this organization would do is was a foundation actually was then acquiring these projects and then hiring students from campus to work on that. They would actually be paid, make money, make pretty good money actually. And we did it more for the entrepreneurial side of it, and it was based on the French model. And so we established that foundation in Rotterdam. And so I guess that was an exposure to actually building something from scratch, like really get the yellow pages, start calling companies, say, hey, we're these guys at Rotterdam, and you have a project for us. And I remember that first time when I actually do have a project. This was for the railways in Europe, to actually map out the railways, and for a particular project on that. And so it was all really a lot about data research. But obviously at first success is just amazing. So I guess that's sort of so, oh, that's building something from scratch, and from an entrepreneur perspective, that's intriguing. So I guess I sort of shelved that, start working with the bank, and then I got sort of eager and say, hey, you know, I want to do something with that. So it's interesting of the combination of, I'm intrigued by sort of the banking and finance. I'd like to do it though in a different sort of capacity, more hands-on, and from an entrepreneurial capacity. That's what I definitely think sort of um, you know led me to further explore the opportunities here in Canada. And also when you then sort of look for that, you say, hey, actually there is a problem here, and I think we can find a solution for that. So yeah, it's really a combination of finance and banking. I like it, but can we do it in a different way, combined with sort of an entrepreneurial eagerness that probably was sort of under the surface already.
Well, there's one final step of this, which was you just moved to a new country. How how I mean, that's probably not the most natural path, right? To move to a new country and start a startup like that feels like a lot of variables that you're managing at the same time. What were like maybe some of the most beneficial aspects of doing it that way? And I know you've already referenced a couple times like things you saw happening in Europe that you didn't see once you came here to Canada and North America. So maybe there's elements there, but then also like what was the hardest or most challenging part of, being in a new country, understanding new ways of how things work, but also trying to build a startup within that ecosystem? Like talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, looking back, it was it was definitely I had moments where I asked myself, like, why do I need to make it so difficult, right? Because you're combining a lot of different things at the same time. And but there's also a flip side to that, I think, is that the whole, and this sort of intrigued me as well, is that and that's why in general Canada as an immigration country where people start build new futures, and is very interesting. And the fact that for me personally, you pick yourself up out of sort of a comfort zone, which I had back in the Netherlands, and in all respects, like home, move over with the family, quit the job, and then start from scratch in Canada. And as mentioned, landed in Vancouver. Uh, and so the thing is, you sort of have to. Everything's new. It really comes down to just go for it. Build new contacts, meet a lot of people, different people. You learn a lot, and you learn the hard way as well.
Do you think
Because
that Yeah, sorry to interrupt. Do you think that made it like easier in some regards? Like you were already turning a new chapter, and so things were all new. So you like it maybe seemed like you were already outside of your comfort zone, because I think sometimes the jump to entrepreneurship is about stepping outside of your comfort zone. So if you were at home in the Netherlands, you were in your comfort zone, would you have started this versus maybe it was the situational element that why not? Everything's new. Why not dive in?
Yeah, I think there's definitely an element of that. There's definitely an element because if you do it something from a comfort zone, you say, okay, well, let's sort of explore. So maybe I keep my job and then I kind of explore a couple of things. But when am I going to really jump? And when am I going to jump with both feet? You kind of still like you're in this. You're still in a situation that you're used to, and so if you sort of disrupt that basically. I completely disrupted that because there was no reference anymore. I had nothing back to hold on to. It's really starting all over again. So I think that definitely actually helped in sort of the mindset and also the, let's say, it's the whole, in general, just basically moving on from the situation and start something new is for my sort of personal development, and is a really exciting opportunity. It's challenging, it's tough for sure, but yeah, I think just really cutting all the ties and start all over again is where you basically you have to. So it unlocks a lot of energy just to go for it and to be sort of perseverant and certainly when I started with this idea and of FrontFundr, and you have conversations with people and I kind of listening to you and then sort of smiling like interesting, good luck with that, and you know and 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 someone actually told me once, so well, maybe because you're basically doing something new, and certainly because, and we will speak about it perhaps later, but doing something new, and particularly in funding and investing, which is obviously a regulated environment, where you have to sort of push the boundaries and get the regulators on side as well, is that uh, maybe coming from maybe being new and not being sort of having the legacy of being sort of fully aware of how challenging it can be, and it may have been an advantage as well. Yeah.
Yeah, it's true. Like sometimes you come in without historical bias, but also maybe you don't know what some challenges would be until you are all knee deep in it and you have to
Right.
deal with it. And so it may have, caused you to second guess starting this in the first place. Well, let's talk about this. I'm really excited to learn about FrontFundr, but we're on a show called Pitch Please. So every single time before we dive into your business, we have to hear your best pitch, please. So Peter Paul, over to you. Let's hear your best pitch around FrontFundr.
Okay, Mike. Well, everybody is familiar with the Dragon's Den, I'm sure, where you have these dragons sitting in their chairs and they get a stack of money next to them on a table, and then they hear all these pitches. And so what we're doing with FrontFundr is basically turning anyone in the potential in a dragon, basically. And the good thing is you don't need to have a big stack of money. We basically make it accessible for everyone. So FrontFundr is all about providing access and inclusion on both sides of the marketplace. So helping startups, scale-ups, and later stage private companies to raise capital from the public. And the public really means anyone that looks at a company and say, hey, I'm excited about this startup. They're resolving a problem, or perhaps I'm already a customer of the company, and now I can invest for perhaps as little as $250 or even less. So that's what we're doing with FrontFundr, and we basically build that entire process of connecting companies with the public online and enabling the public to invest. And so we launched our platform in 2015. We're now operating from coast to coast. We've done over 150 successful capital raising campaigns. We have a community of over 40,000 investors on the platform. Um, and we typically help companies anywhere from raising around a half a million to it could be 10 million or 30 million, really later stage companies as well. So the bottom line is really FrontFundr's purpose is to democratize investing in startups, to unlock a massive pool of capital for startups being from the public, and on the other side to provide the public access to investing in these companies from the very beginning. Traditionally, this was again privilege for angels, VCs, and a small group of investors. And we basically say, why is that? Why don't we basically open this up and enable anyone to invest from the very beginning in startups and grow with these companies, and obviously, also receive significant returns on these startups.
That's I love the concept, and I mean, you won my heart at Dragon's Den. It's why I started this show. I could watch it all day, every day. Now I'm not saying invest, and I'm not worried about the drama, but I love just talking to startups, and I focused obviously specifically on Canadian startups and the ecosystem here. But I love hearing people's stories of like what drove them, like what is their background? Did they ever think they were going to become an entrepreneur? And what are they working on? Like, there's so many cool ideas out there. And to your point, it is interesting, this element of capital, because especially as you're probably learning, in Canada, there's a far different funding ecosystem, which maybe we'll talk a little bit about that today. There's a lot of support from the government in Canada, but rarely to get things out of research stage. There's not as much capital available to help people get into actual market, go to market funding, sales oriented funding, take your project into something that's more feasible is not always there. And so there's like some gaps in the system. So maybe let's start there. Like, you obviously helped in the fundraising element of companies before for a bit. What are the ways that companies that are, from the earliest idea to bigger companies in Canada, and actually, sorry, maybe just before we go there, FrontFundr focused on Canadian startups, North American? What's your scope? You said you're coast to coast in Canada, but is it mostly for Canadian startups today?
That's correct. So we are focused on the Canadian market. So we're indeed coast to coast in Canada. The capital raise, so the companies on FrontFundr are predominantly Canadian companies. We can also have help of foreign companies that want to raise capital in Canada. So on the other side of our marketplace, on the investor side, we're indeed predominantly focused really on Canadian investors. We have had US companies, for example, that also have presence in Canada say, hey, we'd like to also open up our capital raise to our Canadian audience, or perhaps customers, or perhaps they have plans to expand into Canada. We can help those companies by basically listing their capital raise on FrontFundr and opening up for Canadian investors. But indeed, we are focused on the Canadian capital raising and investment
Okay. So
market.
then maybe let's start there. Like, what are the ways that companies go from like idea to mega, publicly traded company, and what are the funding sources available to them today in the Canadian marketplace?
Yeah, so from a early stage, so from really an idea stage, typically companies would founders that may have some of their own capital that they put in on top of all their sweat equity, which is typically the case, of course, to go to family and friends. And it's really then obviously on a trust basis to raise capital in sort of in your closer network, and then the next thing is you go to angel investors, um, and so that's sort of the early stages. So your own capital, family, friends, and perhaps you manage to get a few angels in the early rounds. And as you progress, if you get sort of start validating your product market fit, and continuing to, and perhaps already generating revenues, then of course you're looking for growth capital. And again, you may have probably not have more money yourself you put in, then you're going to look for other alternatives, perhaps again in your network, more angels, and then at that stage, VCs may also come into play. Although many companies are still obviously too early for VCs really to attract capital. Good to note though that certainly in Canada there's also a significant funding opportunities, government grants, across the country, which are really interesting and quite unique for Canada. It's not something they have, south of the border. So I would always encourage companies to also actively explore opportunities for funding from government and grants, etc. It's all non-dilutive capital, right? So there's definitely something there, and investors like to see that too. If you go to investors, say, "Hey, I'm already got a grant secured," and so if you invest in my company, you're kind of leveraging funds that are already raised through grants, that obviously makes it also interesting for investors, right? Because they see each investment dollar already perhaps matched with government money. So so those are really in the early stage, so pre-seed, seed, the source of capital. But if you look at the size of that pool, if you look at what the NACO, which is the National Angel Capital Organization network in Canada, and as well as the CVCA, which is a VC and private equity, if you look at the pool of capital that's going into sort of pre-seed, seed, is relatively, it's small. For a NACO, we're looking at an annual base around 250, 300 million per year. And then if you look at the smaller deals for CVCA, another 200-300. So the pool is around 500 million per year for startups, which is relatively really a small pool. So that is definitely, let's say, a constraint on the size of the traditional capital pool, and that's one of the problems, of course, that we address with FrontFundr by adding an entire new pool of capital.
It's interesting. So across that spectrum, then, so there's obviously grants, there's angel investing, friends and family, venture capital, and eventually IPO. Where I know you said you help companies raise from 500,000 and up. What's sort of the sweet spot? So if I'm a startup listening, or I guess if I'm even a potential person that wants to invest, what's like the style of startup or company that would be on a FrontFundr? Like what aspect of the
Yeah,
market do you focus on?
yeah. So in terms of industries, we're industry agnostic. So any company, any industry can really explore raising through investment crowdfunding, and we're always keen to have a chat and see if we can help. In terms of the sweet spot, in terms of capital raising side, it's typically between 500,000 to 2 million in that sort of raise, where companies are looking for, let's say, for growth capital. So usually it's beyond an idea. It's not just pure an idea. So okay, let's put a deck together and then see if we can raise some money. They're typically companies that have already a bit more to show and tell. So they already have sort of started generating revenues around the point of initial commercialization. And that's really important, because then they also have literally something to talk about, a story, and they can also back it up with, hey, this is where we are now. We already have X number of clients using our product. We're generating X revenues, and now we want to further commercializing. So now we're looking to raise capital. So there are companies that are beyond sort of the idea stage, and typically around commercialization and sort of advancing in the, let's say, the journey of product market fit, if you like. So that's in terms of the size, so 500,000 to 2 million. But just to be clear, we've done capital raises for much larger companies. We're actually just now signed up a company that's doing a Series C, where we're part of. So obviously later stage, right? And then don't raise everything through FrontFundr, but then we're an additional source of capital together with, let's say, a larger traditional pools of capital. In terms of as mentioned, in the industries, we're industry agnostic, but the companies that typically do well, fit well on our platform, are companies that are B2C, consumer products, impact investing, the kind of companies that have a product and service that's easier to understand for the wider audience, and therefore it's easier for investors to sort of associate with it, get excited about it, and invest in it. So yeah, it's typically B2C, and I think that is also related to the sort of the stage of the industry, because the reality is that investment crowdfunding. So what we're doing with FrontFundr is, certainly in Canada, it's still in its early stages, still in its an industry in its infancy, and then as the industry grows and the investors get more familiar, and the whole retail investors get more and more familiar with investing in private markets, obviously then they will also look at all sorts of different companies and different industries. So yeah, it's typically B2C, and companies that are on their way to sort of grow the business and looking for growth capital.
Interesting. So I guess that's sort of, if I were to put it, it's sort of the seed, pre-seed, something a little bit same timing or a little bit after where you would normally go to an angel investor, but it's beyond the friends and family because generally friends and family are you're pre-product market fit. You're still trying to build something to get revenue, so you're a little bit past there.
Yeah, yeah. And just to add
And
to that, Mike, Mike, is that for a company, this is a great opportunity. Think about companies that have a consumer product that already have a customer base or community that's following them. Why not engage those people? They're already familiar with your product and they like what you're doing, and now they can be part of your journey as a startup. And in fact, they can also share any potential upside, right? So for companies, raising through investment crowdfunding is not just about raising capital, but it's also a great opportunity to create awareness and to around your company, your products and services, and so it's just a sort of combined marketing funding effort.
got it. It's interesting, interesting concept. So, and you said today most are like a B2C because people can grasp it, but there is possibly now or in the future, it doesn't nothing preventing it from B2B type companies coming on here. I'm also just taking a
Absolutely.
quick look simultaneously. A lot of them are like products or services, not so much like software, as an example. Is that just because of similar things that you said, which is today it's just people can understand it and grasp it and it's a little bit easier, or are you avoiding software in your perceivable future?
No, it's exactly that first point you raised. So we're not avoiding any in the industries or whatsoever. But for example, software as a service, it could be really great companies to invest in. It may, and we have examples of that. We've done companies certainly in the past, but it may be more, more challenging to appeal to the wider investor community. We actually, with those companies, already sit down and said, okay, so what are the particular, what's the target group that is likely to understand this, get excited about it, and then we can have a really targeted plan, right? So we have had companies with apps that or software that helps in the medical industry, and where obviously professionals in the medical industry will recognize that they understand completely the product that's being the problem is being addressed, right? So there's opportunities for that. You just need to really think through and look at what is that target group that is likely to want to have a look at this opportunity.
Makes sense. Now, are there competitors in this space? Like, I'm gonna say their names. Hopefully, you're okay with it. But like, as you're talking through this, I'd love to understand, and I'm sure it is, but where it's different than like a GoFundMe or things of that nature. Are there competitors to you, or are these similar but you are different, and why? And help me understand that a little bit.
Sure. Yeah. So GoFundMe and for example Kickstarter, and you go there are great examples of let's say traditional crowdfunding. So typically it's about backing an idea and or pre-purchasing a product. And so sometimes they're donation based or rewards based. So excuse me, they're not you're not investing in companies. You're supporting a company or a project or a cause, right? And that is a fundamental difference with investment crowdfunding or equity crowdfunding, where you actually invest in the company, right? So it's an investment, therefore it's also all regulated. Investment crowdfunding fully regulated. So one way or the other, investors or participants in investment crowdfunding always get an interest, a financial interest in the company with a certain, upside, um, um, potential upside in the future. So that's the key difference with sort of the traditional crowdfunding. And then in terms of competition, there are other platforms in the industry. It's still an industry in its let's say infancy, certainly in Canada, and competitors, other platforms is also a good sign. It means that you're onto something. But it's good to emphasize again the fundamental difference between the sort of traditional crowdfunding versus investment crowdfunding, which is really about retail investors investing in private companies, just as retail investors, of course, took a huge jump in the public markets, through online platforms like, Robinhood, Wealthsimple in Canada, and basically what we're doing with FrontFundr is saying, okay, those same retail investors can also actually invest in private companies. So yeah, the investment and the securities aspect of it is a very significant part of the industry we're in.
Got it. So instead of like I'm buying some of your earliest version of, I'm putting up money to buy the first version of your product, or I just want to, support that idea, especially at idea stage. In this regard, you're buying stock. You're buying stock in a company that is not yet privately traded with fractional amounts. Now, maybe let's talk through how that works. Let's take both personas. Let's start first with the investor. If I'm an individual, I guess could companies also invest? Who can invest, and how do they invest? Actually, would be the question that I'd love to understand.
Yeah, yeah. So from the investor side of our marketplace, um, uh, basically it's everybody can be an investor. So whether you are a young professional, you're excited about a company that you want to invest in, be part of, and you want to invest perhaps $200 or $500, we're there for those investors. There are larger investors that perhaps are experienced with investing in private companies and make larger investments. Uh, they're also welcome on our platform. It's really about democratizing, the investor investing in private companies for the wider investor community, really. So they're all retail investors, smaller investors, larger investors. But to your point, there are also companies that look at opportunities on our platform, and we're very interested in that because the opportunities to basically with investment crowdfunding with FrontFundr is not sort of displacing traditional capital. It's actually adding more capital to the table, right? And I'm a strong believer in how those different sources of capital can go hand in hand, right? And actually expand the capital pool. So from the investor side, it's really the emphasis is retail investors. Just to give you an idea, about 75% of investors on our platform are so-called non-accredited investors, so really smaller retail investors, and then 25% are accredited investors, which is typically investors with meet certain income or financial assets thresholds, and which may also include angel investors, right, or high net worth individuals, or really larger investors. So we see a mix of all sorts of investors on our platform, and the exciting thing, Mike, is that if you're a retail investor and you can invest in for as little as a couple $100 in companies, you can actually create a portfolio in startups for perhaps $5,000 or $10,000, and you can invest in 10 or 20 companies.
That's cool. Super cool. So you could do it obviously as a retail investor, individual with a couple $100. You could also do it if you were an angel and you wanted to do some through this platform as well. Or if you had a company and you wanted to invest on behalf of that company or small business and you wanted to invest in some interesting startups, you could do that too. Now, and I guess it ranges. You're saying as little as $250. I guess it ranges depending on who's raising and how much they're raising. There's probably a minimum, but it could go as low as $250.
Yeah, totally. It's typically up to the company, so the capital raises and where they want to set that minimum investment on our platform. Obviously, because we're all about making accessible to the wider investor community, including the smaller investors. So typically the minimums are around $250, $500. Sometimes it's set at $1,000 or higher. But you see, investment range is indeed anywhere from $250 to investors that invest, $100,000 or more through the platform. So it's really a wide range, and it sort of demonstrates the inclusivity that we're pursuing, right?
That's cool. Now, talk to me if I'm a startup, or yeah, you're still a startup at this stage. So if I'm a startup looking to raise some capital, I've got product market fit. It sounds like I also should have some revenue and regularly paying customers to be able to break in here. But maybe I'm assuming. So who, if, as a startup, who should get started with FrontFundr? We've kind of talked about the raising ranges, but like, what are some of the other criteria, and how does that process work?
Yeah. Yeah, so indeed. So we talked about sort of the range criteria in terms of the capital looking for. So again, typically, anywhere started from 500,000 to up to 5 or 10 million. In that range. In terms of companies that are, as you mentioned, that have traction. That's really important, because then they can then they can talk about it and pitch that to the wider investor community. And what is really important, companies that are uh, are recognized, and are interested in raising from the wider community. So if you're purely looking for capital, and you're thinking, I go to some angels or pitch with VCs and maybe list on FrontFundr too, who knows, maybe it works and maybe they give me a call when the money is in. That's not going to be a good fit. So because it's really, capital raise, you really have to jump in with both feet and recognize that FrontFundr provides a stage for you to go out there and broadcast your investment opportunity to the public, right? And to broadcast, obviously, to our own community, to the FrontFundr community as well. But it's really important that companies understand that is actually, you're really going on stage, you're running a campaign from preparation to the final day of the race, and that's a lot of work. And you need to sort of feel excited about that and appreciate the value of, hey, if I go to my own customers now with the opportunity to invest in my company, and I'm gonna attract a whole new group of investors. um, I'm excited about that as a startup. That creates awareness, and those people will you basically raising through FrontFundr. You're not only getting investors, but you're also getting brand champions, right? People have literally a vested interest to share, say, hey, I invested in this company and check it out, and I'm already a customer and I invested too. And so that is really important, that companies understand that they're not outsourcing funding to their funding to FrontFundr, but that they basically, that we work in partnership to really reach out to the wider investor community. That is really important, and that's why when we engage with companies, we always ask about, what are your, obviously, what are your funding goals? What is your community like? Do you have a community that we start leverage? Because what is really an important success driver for a campaign is that once you launch your campaign on FrontFundr, that you can always show traction. That's why typically when companies launch on a platform, they already have traction in terms of funding, funding their getting to their funding goal, target with around 20%, right? So they already show sort of, okay, we're on our way, we're already getting investors jumped in, and now we're going to bring more investors in. Those are really important factors for a company to consider exploring, investment crowdfunding as a source of raising capital.
Got it. And so there is a bit of an intake process. I submit saying I'm willing and I'm interested to raise through FrontFundr, but there's a bit of an intake process on your side where you sit down with them, you understand their motivations, their desires, their goals here to see if it's going to be the right fit before it gets listed on the platform.
Absolutely, and that intake is sort of twofold. So indeed, intake at the beginning, we kind of do a pre-screen, and is there a fit for raising on FrontFundr? There's no point to proceed if we from both sides are not sort of believe there's a good fit, because it's just a waste of effort, right? And it's too important to waste time, and companies need to raise capital to build their business. So it's really important to pre-screen and determine whether there's a fit. And then secondly, what's important to note, Mike, is that we're basically FrontFundr it's a curated marketplace. So it's not that we just list any company. Also, when we see there is a fit, but we also perform due diligence on these companies, right? So because on the investor side, if you invest, let's say, $500 in a company, you're not gonna go through a whole data room and check everything out. So basically, What we do with FrontFundr is not providing investment advice or recommendation. We're not even allowed to do that. But what we do is basically we want to mitigate the risk that investors shouldn't be exposed to. So we do check like, oh, is the company, is all the paperwork in order? Are they properly incorporated? What are their plans with the capital they're raising? Does it all make sense? We do background checks on founders and other principals involved in companies. So that screening element is really important, and we complete that before we bring companies on the platform.
That's good to know. It's an extra peace of mind for those investing that some, like to your point, for $250 or $500, I'm not going to spend hours checking out the background of everything on this company. So in some regard, if they're listed on the platform, FrontFundr has done some of that on your behalf. It's not financial advice that, hey, this is going to be the next unicorn,
Right.
but you've made sure that the things are in order to make sure that your investment is safe, in something that's not a
It's
scam. Uh,
yeah, that's not a scam exactly. And as I said, I choose my words carefully here. Is that we're basically mitigate that risk, right? We can never eliminate. We can certainly not say this is a safe investment. In fact, the reality is you're investing in startups, and startups carry obviously more risk, like where they may not even be around, have reached the point of product market fit and all of that. So we take that really serious in terms of providing investors proper information so they can make an informed investment decision, including saying, look, these are early stage investments, these are risky investments, and the more reason for you to offer opportunities to diversify, right? So if you're excited about a company, that's fantastic, but should you put really, let's say you got $5,000 that you're looking to invest in private companies, maybe you should invest a proportion of that in this company and look for other opportunities in startups to diversify it. So that's really important. Yeah.
Makes sense. So obvious question: how does FrontFundr make money?
Yes. Yeah. So how FrontFundr makes money? So basically, we charge capital raisers on the platform. So capital raisers pay us basically an upfront due diligence listing fee. And it's anywhere between typically about $5,000 to $10,000. It depends on the let's say the structure of the capital raise. And so we take the company through a due diligence, and you work with our campaign management team to prepare your campaign, and so that's sort of the those are the upfront costs. And then the second one is we basically take a percentage of the funds raised through our platform, which is typically in the range of 6 to 8%. On the capital raises. So those are the issuers, capital raises, and on the investor side, investors um, investors pay a 1.5% fee through investments through the platform, which is kept at $100.
Cool. I like it. So there's a piece of what I like also about the business model, and this is something I get super interested in, is you've got something up front to help secure the energy in the listing. You got a variable based amount on the value of the total raise, but it's a fair amount. Definitely much fairer than like a SeatGeek that takes like 15% from all sides. And then the investor has a small fee, but obviously they're investing smaller amounts of money, and you don't want to disincentivize them from investing in this space by them losing 5, 10, 20 points off the top. So you've obviously made that super nominal to get into this space. So super cool. Now, what's been sort of like your favorite part about this journey? You've been building a new company in Canada, helping empower other startups. Is there like a memorable moment or something that really stands out for you since your start of this in 2015?
Yeah, and there have been several memorable moments along this journey, and you know um, yeah, an example of a moment that's really exciting, because it's sort of the validation of what we're of our purpose with FrontFundr is a company that actually it's a ski resort in BC. It's called Red Mountain, and they raised on FrontFundr. And this is an example of a company that raised on FrontFundr for Canadian investors, but they also listed on a US platform to raise from US investors because it's close to the border. So they also have a lot of um, US visitors, and so basically they offer an opportunity to sort of own a piece of the mountain, right? So really the opportunity to invest in a relatively smaller ski resort. um, and I remember participating myself as well in that race, so as an investor through FrontFundr. And I remember going there to Red Mountain with my family. And the cool thing is with the raises, and I didn't mention it yet, but we can be quite creative in terms of you can invest in a company, you can attach perks. So if you
Mm.
invest in a certain, beverage company, you can say, okay, invest $500 and you get a box of the drinks, and you invest 2,000, and you get sort of an annual subscription or something like that. They did a similar thing with Red Mountain. You invest a certain amount and you get, ski tickets, or you get a season pass, or you can even get design skis. Actually, is the I received a pair of design skis with a Red Mountain logo on it and all that. So I was there with my family, and I was in the ski lift, and my family was there in the chairs in front of me, and I was having a chat with this gentleman in ski, and he started talking. He said, he asked me like, "Hey, have you ever been before?" I said, "No, it's the first time." And then he continued. He said, "Well, it's pretty cool." He said, they're so Red Mountain's now raising capital, and they're actually raising on a platform. And he was really well informed. So yeah, it's good FrontFundr, and so you can invest in a company in the Red Mountain through this platform. And I thought, wow, that's interesting. And of course, I wanted to learn more about his experience, right? So he was explaining how that product, how the process works, and how you sign up, and you have to ask a couple of questions because again there's a certain know your client kind of onboarding process. So he was explaining that, and then how he completed his investment. He said, "Yeah, it's pretty intuitive. It's all very straightforward." And then at the end of the ride, I said, "Well, actually, it's really interesting to hear that because." I know FrontFundr very well, and it was sort of funny to hear not only his experience, but just really an experience from a user, right? And
Yeah, and his willingness to share it.
yeah, totally, totally. And of course, I didn't let the rabbit out of the head yet by saying, "Oh yeah, no, I know that. That's actually my company." But that's just huge validation for what we're doing, and people get excited about the fact that they have that opportunity, right? So yeah, it's one of the example. Another example is a company um, that actually raised on FrontFundr, and then fairly soon after, within 3 years, went public, and so which was a great success story. And so where investors had a significant return on their investments. Again, 3 years is really soon. Typically, it easily takes 5 years or longer. But yeah, that was the first milestone of look, I was able to invest in a company early stage for as little as $500. I think their minimum was even $100, and now I've got 30, 40 times returns. So yeah, those are exciting stories that sort of huge validation and testimonials for what we're doing.
That's super cool. Now these are the good stories. Obviously, there's been probably bumpy at the safest word parts along this journey. I especially imagine around the regulation of this space. But what sort of has been the most challenging element of getting this going?
Yeah. So the regulation for sure, and let's not get into that too deep. But it's part of, if you do something new and you do it in an environment that is regulated. And I'm not against that. I think this industry needs regulation, whether we like it or not. Um, so it's kind of what I signed up from the beginning, right? Like, you want to do this is innovative. You're going to spend significant time to talk to regulators and get their comfort of what we're doing here. So yeah, so that was that took quite some time before we could even launch the platform, and it still does. Even today, we're working on something new where again we have to work with regulators, and that can take time. And also, in Canada we don't have one regulator, federal regulator. We have 13 regulators. So each province has their own regulator. So that's definitely challenging and sort of ongoing, but we also made great progress. We have harmonized investment crowdfunding rules in Canada from coast to coast, and so it is opening up, and great progress made. But that's been a lot of work. And then the other thing is, what is challenging, when we're not, I've been just building a new company with FrontFundr, but you're also basically building a new market, right? So the whole advocacy and education around this has been a lot of work, right? So it's not like, okay, here's FrontFundr and here's what we do, but you have to really sort of take a step back and explain what investment crowdfunding is, both to companies, how does it work, and to investors, like, yes, you can actually invest in these companies from the very beginning, and no, you don't need to be an angel investor, and so the whole aspect of advocating this industry in general, certainly if and I've been, we've been pioneering this from the very beginning. That's been a lot of work for
Yeah,
sure.
I
Yeah.
can I can imagine. Sounds like a lot of uphill battles, but it sounds like you guys are doing amazing. I mean, 2015, we're now just on the cusp of 2024. So you're just cusping on about 9 years. That's amazing time in the life cycle of a startup in Canada, obviously. You've got a number of great listings that I was just kind of cruising as we were talking through this, and I was looking at them before the show. Amazing platform. And it's truly helping Canadian companies continue to grow and expand their reach. And I love today is consumer focused, but I can't wait to see all of the other categories that this evolves into and makes it more widely available for Canadians to help grow these startups. Now, if people are looking to find out more or want to help, is there any help that FrontFundr is looking for right now? Or if not, where can people go if they're a startup or an individual investor to get started?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, for I would say to all companies, and whether you're an early stage company looking for pre-seed capital, or you're a company well on its way and looking at a, a larger round of financing, and like to explore, alternative routes, which certainly today in today's funding environment is more, relevant and important than ever. I would say absolutely reach out to us. Go to our website frontfundr.com, and you can, find info there to get in touch with us. So for companies, always keen to have a chat and see if we can help, see if there's a fit. And of course, for investors, for the public, anyone basically who's excited about this and interested in exploring investing in startups, I would say, start the journey, and inform yourself about this opportunity. There's lots of information on frontfundr.com for investors as well, to sort of get familiar with how this works, and yeah, sign up on the platform and get our newsletter and explore opportunities.
That's super cool. And we'll link it in the show notes and description. But obviously, FrontFundr is FrontFundr.com. Just make sure you remove the last E in FrontFundr. But amazing platform, doing a lot of great work. Thank you for sharing, your story, Peter-Paul, today. Thank you for sharing the story of the work that you're doing. It's a super cool story of, your risk taking from coming to Canada to starting a business to growing that business to something very successful over the last 9 years is very inspirational, especially for someone that never really even knew they were going to be an entrepreneur, just had a spark back in the day. Any closing words on your side today?
No, Mike, I want to thank you for this opportunity. It was great, chatting with you about this exciting space of investment crowdfunding and opening it up to the public, and providing a new pool of capital for entrepreneurs, and yeah, I would say, as mentioned, for companies, investors, have a look at this. This is where it's going. We see that in other geographies where it's already really mainstream, where retail investors are fully, vested and participating in the private market. So yeah, I look forward as we continue our journey. Thanks for having me.
I, I can't wait. I'm sure I'm going to start checking some out, and I'm sure I'll drop a couple investments in there myself to be a part of the journey. Thanks again for joining today, Peter-Paul. Thank you everyone for listening. Hopefully you go check it out. I think this is super interesting. If you like listening to Pitch Please, it means you are listening to either understanding how the Canadian ecosystem is going, how these startups are doing. So you're either a startup that might need this or someone interested in this space that may want to jump in. So check them out, and we will catch you all on the next episode. Thank you.
Thank you.